and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup, keeping my distance from Andy because I have a cold.
Okay.
Sorry.
Feel better. We have a lot of news to talk about, and we hope we can get through it. Because same-sex marriages did get underway in Alabama this week, but confusion reigns as most counties are still refusing to issue the licenses.
There are fascinating details of this, which we will explain to you. Meanwhile, the very wicked governor of Kansas, a very good Frank Baum reference, thank you, Andy, finds a new way to hurt LGBT people.
On the other hand, a judge in New Jersey has ruled that so-called conversion therapy amounts to consumer fraud.
We'll tell you, unfortunately, about the murders of LGBT people from New Orleans to Massachusetts this week.
The opposition leader in Malaysia has lost his final appeal of a trumped-up sodomy conviction.
It's been going on for years, and it's all political. And speaking of political, the Pope had urged Slovakians to pass 3 anti-gay measures, but they all failed in a referendum.
The big winner at the Grammys was an out gay man
who made an out statement. And we'll review Cynthia Nixon's directorial debut, a race relations play, and the events
yes.
about the aftermath of mass murder.
Sounds, yeah, cheery, doesn't it? That's what it's about.
Okay. But we start in Alabama, speaking of cheery.
It's a roller coaster.
Well, it started at the beginning of the week when the Supreme Court, in its entirety, on a vote of 7-2, refused to extend the stay preventing same-sex marriages in Alabama, and thus marriages could begin. Now, in that decision, Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia dissented, and Thomas said, and you know, we never hear from him out loud on the court, but in this written opinion, he said that he's angry because the Supreme Court is taking an increasingly cavalier attitude towards the states and their laws. Yes. Because, heaven forbid, we should pay attention to the United States Constitution.
I think he said it was indecorous.
That too.
This is highly significant, folks, for wherever you live, especially if you live in one of these states that doesn't have same-sex marriage, because this seemed, game over. The Supreme Court is definitely determined to allow same-sex marriage in this country with this ruling on the Sixth Circuit case.
The denial of the stay extension.
Right.
And you can, again, we don't know for sure. It could end up being a 7-2 decision for same-sex marriage nationally, because clearly Roberts and Alito joined in this denial of a stay extension, or they could find a reason to be against the actual legalization, and we could end up with a 5-4 decision.
Right.
So the Supreme Court did that. So then the time comes for Alabama to open up its license bureaus or courthouses. But Supreme Court Justice Roy Moore in Alabama,
the Chief Justice of the state,
who you may remember got kicked off the bench about 10 years ago because he is, as it says there,
hero of the First Amendment, hero of the Constitution, hero of religious liberty.
Because he put a big monument with the 10 Commandments inside the courthouse and then was told that wasn't good, and they were removed, and he got kicked off the bench. But then he got reelected a couple of years ago.
Because they like that stuff.
So he wrote an order to the probate judges in the 67 counties and said, you are forbidden to issue marriage licenses for 2 reasons.
This is state law, and the federal court doesn't have jurisdiction over it.
Right, and this one federal court judge's decision does not control all of you. And the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to define marriage. Now, he's right about the first one in terms of the federal court decision only applying to the plaintiffs in that case. He's wrong, of course, we think, about the Supreme Court's ability to define marriage.
There's also something called the Supremacy Clause, which says that federal court decisions certainly, and even he acknowledges, Roy Moore acknowledges, that once the Supreme Court rules on this, that's it. He said, of course, marriage will still be only between a man and a woman. You can't change that, but we will have to follow the law once the Supreme Court rules.
But I do want to go to the first point about the federal court decision. We talked about this last week, but it remains true that as even Judge Grenade, who issued the decision from her federal court bench declaring the anti-same-sex marriage law in Alabama unconstitutional, in fact, technically, it only applies to the plaintiffs in the case, but what she did was just lift the statement by the Florida judge who ran into this same thing that said, yes, technically this may only apply to these plaintiffs, but the decision that the Alabama law is unconstitutional rests not on my decision, it rests on the U.S. Constitution. So the rest of you may try to resist issuing these licenses, but any other couples in any of your territories can simply come into court and ask to have the law overturned in their case, and they will win. And in fact, some plaintiffs denied at the license bureaus.
Including the primary plaintiffs in the case.
Exactly. Humphrey and...
Searcy.
No, not Searcy. Sampson, I think.
Sorry.
Were denied in Mobile. 23 of the 67 counties are issuing, as we tape on Wednesday afternoon, licenses to same-sex couples. The rest are either closed down entirely or issuing licenses only to opposite-sex couples.
And if there are a few that aren't issuing to anybody, right? Yeah,
right.
That's the closed down entirely business. Yeah. Now, the judge in Mobile was sued for contempt by the lawyers for the plaintiffs and then by NC, National Center for Lesbian Rights as well. And they're naming everybody in their suit, not just that judge, but everybody in the state. Because the original case, the Alabama case, only named the Attorney General of the state and did not name everybody, which is a little problematic. You're supposed to name sort of everybody who's involved. The governor, for instance, his attitude is, well, you know, I want to follow the law, but I'm not going to take action against any of the probate judges. And essentially, whether they do the marriages or they don't do the marriages, I ain't getting involved.
Right. That's better than standing in the schoolhouse door, as the former governor of Alabama
He's not happy,
did.
though.
Well, he's not happy to be stuck in this mess. The Southern Poverty Law Center, by the way, has filed an ethics complaint against Justice Roy Moore because of the way he's handling this. And there's some strange thing where the Vital Statistics Bureau in the Department of Public Health in Alabama evidently will process marriage licenses even if they haven't been signed by the local probate judge. So if couples can get their hands on a license, which they can in some places and not in others, it's possible that they can have a legal marriage ultimately.
Of course, in one place, a minister went into the marriage bureau and tried to marry people right there and got arrested for it. Actually, I believe in the separation of church and state. You could have done that outside.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. And meanwhile, the 11th Circuit, which includes Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, has put the appeals from the Alabama ruling and the Florida ruling on hold pending the Supreme Court taking up the cases. So the anti-same-sex marriage people can't even pursue their appeal at the moment in the 11th Circuit. They have to wait for the Supreme Court.
A couple of other notes. You've heard a lot about Judge Roy Moore, but he did say some interesting things this week. When he was asked, about the comparison with George Wallace standing in the door, he said, "This isn't about race. This is about choice." So, but I don't think he's pro-choice. And he also said he acted because father-daughter marriages would be next. But then there was this great probate judge, Alan King in Jefferson County.
I love him.
Who said, if someone can't understand the joy and happiness of others, then I don't know what else I can say.
Maybe it was a different probate judge who said, anytime I am in opposition to Roy Moore, Clarence Thomas, and
Yes,
Scalia, I can sleep better at night.
Now, there is a little wrinkle here in a case we've told you about before. Now that, see, Alabama is now the 37th state to have same-sex marriage, at least in part. So we told you about the case of Dr. Paul Hurd of Alabama, who lost his male spouse, David Fancher, in a 2011 accident. They had been married in, Massachusetts or something. They were married. But Fancher's mother was suing for Hurd's share of the settlement over the wrongful death, and now she can't get it. And she was an acolyte of Roy Moore's, worked with him.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, in ancillary marriage news, there's some thinking that Nebraska may have inadvertently legalized same-sex marriage as cases there are working their way up to the 8th Circuit.
It's because they love gun rights. So they passed legislation, a bill, allowing those receiving spousal benefits from the Department of Defense to apply for gun permits without being state residents for 180 days, as is normally required, and as is already allowed to members of the military. And the bill didn't specify the gender of the spouse, so they now have some same-sex marriage recognition in Nebraska.
Ha ha ha.
By right-wingers.
Yeah. And
the Second Amendment trumps all.
Yes. Sad news from Indiana. That the original marriage case there, or one of the original ones, was brought by a lesbian couple under an emergency request because one partner was dying of ovarian cancer.
It was Nikki Kwasny, 38, and she did die. She is survived by her wife, Amy, that's Nikki there in the hospital. She's survived by her wife, Amy Sandler. They married in Massachusetts in 2013. They did get emergency recognition, and they were still married after the 7th Circuit stayed most of the same-sex marriages. But that was overturned by the 7th Circuit in September.
Thank you for your heroic fight, Nikki.
Yes.
I'm not thanking Brian Brown, head of the National Organization for Marriage, who in his continuing desperate quest for relevance has announced—
And money.
Definitely money. Has announced a 3rd annual March for Marriage in Washington, D.C. on April 25th, which will be around the time of the arguments, the oral arguments at the U.S. Supreme Court. His previous 2 marches have drawn a total of what, 10 people? I exaggerate for effect.
On the other hand—
but they have been very poorly attended.
John Boehner, no friend of ours, said the U.S. House will not get involved in the Supreme Court same-sex marriage case. The court will make its decision, and that's why they're there, he said vacuously. As he always— Yes.
Democrats from both the U.S. Senate and U.S. House will file an amicus brief at the Supreme Court supporting same-sex marriage, as will the Department of Justice, and as will the Human Rights Campaign, in concert with Robbie Kaplan, the lawyer who won the Windsor case, striking down the part of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, that forbade federal recognition of same-sex marriages. Now, I'm very cynical, and I see this effort by HRC as an attempt to gather names for their mailing list.
Right, sure.
But I read the brief.
It's sort of like the draft Elizabeth Warren effort.
Exactly.
I like Elizabeth Warren. You like me get the 10 emails a day to draft, but she's not running.
It's mining names.
Right.
So HRC went to Robbie Kaplan because she, after all, has won a marriage case at the Supreme Court, and she has been trying to get into a lot of these cases nationally without success. So she's happy to join in this brief and have a chance to make an argument. So she wrote a brief in concert with Dale Carpenter from the University of Minnesota and another prominent lawyer whose name escapes me at the moment. I read the brief, and it's really arguing a particular point, which is how you define animus in deciding this case, and that it doesn't have to be about outright hatred, but it can be about the effect of the actions. And it's a very well-written brief and very clear, and it's a real brief.
And something that they feel is going to appeal especially to Justice Kennedy, who may follow this in writing his opinion.
And in a situation where normally people who file amicus briefs are particular organizations or coalitions of organizations or whatever, it's supposed to be a way to open up the process a little to regular citizens who can then sign their name and...
the People's Brief.
Exactly. That's what they're calling it.
That's right.
So if you want to take a look at it and consider signing on, if you want HRC to have your name and be sending you 10 emails a day, you can go to hrc.org and they will be, and you will find the People's Brief.
All right. We've told you what's happening in Alabama, a little update in Kansas, where now 84% of residents have access to their legal right to same-sex marriage in their counties.
Well, yes and no.
The state does not to get married. The state does not recognize it, however, and the ACLU is trying to fix that in a suit.
Yeah, things are a little dicey here and there.
In South Dakota, attorneys are asking the judge there to lift the stay in the wake of the Alabama having its stay not kept in place.
Then there's the little gossipy controversy this week related to the Axelrod book about Obama.
Yeah.
Where David Axelrod has written a book called Believer.
Yeah.
Believer.
Believer, but not
Belieber. Someone made a joke about it being a Justin Bieber book.
Oh, I see.
Where he talks about a lot of stuff. You know, he ran Obama's campaigns and was very much on the inside. So one of the stories he tells is that Obama was not really telling the truth in 2008 when he ran for president the first time and said he was not in favor of same-sex marriage, and sat down with Rick Warren and said, to me, God is in the mix and it's, you know, man-woman. And sort of blew the whistle on Obama as making a political decision not to come out for same-sex marriage when...
At the urging of David Axelrod.
Exactly. He acknowledges that.
Yeah.
And he also acknowledges what we've been saying.
Where does he stand on same-sex marriage?
19 years, which is that Obama answered a questionnaire in 1996 in his run for the Illinois State Senate, in which he answered a question by saying, I believe in same-sex marriage and I will do everything in my power to make it happen or prevent its not happening.
In a way, I'm not really interested in what's in a politician's heart. I'm interested in what he or she does. I know there are people who probably don't like us very much who end up voting for us because they're in those districts where they have to, and so it's reprehensible that that the president was not taking a forthright stand, but that's what politicians do most of the time.
And it's a
Sorry for those of you who are listening.
Well, it's a half-empty,
who's candid all
thing.
The time?
It is certainly true that Clinton screwed it up in 1992 by being, at our request, by being forthright in his support for open service by LGBT, at least people at the military, and
he screwed it up because he didn't sign the executive order on the first day.
Oh, that too, but it ended up on the front page of the Times, and Sam Nunn and everybody blew up, and Obama played it a little more coolly and got a lot done. Now, some would say yes, but he should have been forthright in the first place. Others will say he got a lot more done because he was more subtle about it. Take your pick.
Yeah, well.
But Obama was asked about it after Axelrod's book got published, and he said, well, really what I was trying to do, I always believed in rights, but I thought I knew what the politics were, so really I thought civil unions might be the answer.
All right, it's over. Okay, we won that. Now let's get on to the other things.
And you may be hearing about a new study put out by a guy named Paul Sullins. He's a Catholic priest and a professor at Catholic University and a fellow for the Family Research Council and a member of the Knights of Columbus. In other words, his right-wing credentials are impeccable. possible.
And
he's put out another one of these Regnerus studies that, same-sex parents are bad for kids.
Well,
but it's all another put-up job.
He worships a false god, as does, let's, we don't have the picture, we didn't list the picture of the students. That we will get to that, though, if they have it in the control room. But I was going to mention, as long as you talk about Catholics, we told you about Archbishop Cordileone out there in San Francisco imposing a morality clause for teachers, even if they work for the school and don't worship his false god. And hundreds of students protested at St. Mary's Cathedral on February 6th then. And there's going to be a kiss-in there at the cathedral on February 21st. And the
10 a.m., St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco.
The Archdiocese has a new Office of Catholic Identity Assessment. Sounds very 1984.
Certainly does. But they're not alone in that. The Mormon Church went ahead and excommunicated the blogger, the web podcaster, John Dehlin, this week because he supports same-sex marriage and better roles for women in the church, and he has now been formally excommunicated.
But better news for California. The Senate there wants a statue of Sally Ride in Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol. Each state gets 2, and California has Father Junipero Serra and Ronald Reagan, who were 2 pretty deep racists, so one of them has to go if they're going to put Sally Ride in there. I think they're getting rid of Father Serra.
And let's go back to Kansas.
Yeah.
And now we can put up a picture of the heinous governor of Kansas, Sam Brownback, if we have that.
You know, first of all, we know him as the guy who's resisting implementation of same-sex marriage in a state where it's already legal.
Yeah.
And he's being sued over that.
And taking the state down the drain with his budget cutting.
And he had a close re-election as a result in a state overwhelmingly Republican.
Yes, but unfortunately won re-election.
But he discovered that former governor, Democratic governor Kathleen Sebelius, had done an executive order protecting LGBT state employees from discrimination. So he rescinded it. He says, well, you know, we just want to get everything in. We don't want to confuse people on the outside. We just want to get everything in line with what the law is and all this kind of stuff. He is a pig.
There will be a demonstration this Saturday at noon at the state capitol against this action. Any of you in Kansas may want to attend. And in Arkansas, the Senate has passed one of these no local non-discrimination laws if the protected parties are not already covered by state law. The Senate passed this 24-8.
Yikes.
It now goes to the House. This is the same law that Tennessee passed and has gotten away with so far.
That's terrible.
Because it doesn't explicitly target LGBT people, although that is its intention.
Doesn't that matter?
What, that it does?
Yeah.
Well, if you can prove it, if you can prove animus,
yes,
then maybe you can do it. But
Eureka Springs is trying to forestall this in advance. They rushed through their ordinance to ban anti-LGBT discrimination. They already have a domestic partners law there. Is that going to still be allowed? And they married the first same-sex couples in the state when it was briefly legal. This makes Eureka Springs the only city with such a law. I think Fayetteville passed one and then rescinded it last year.
The voters rescinded it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the city council passed it. And the Eureka Springs City Council, in addition to rushing through this non-discrimination bill, also explicitly condemned the effort at the state bill. So they're fighting in Arkansas.
Better news from Wyoming, where the Senate there passed a bill banning discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity 24-6, and Governor Matt Mead supports it. Now, it's on to the House, but the House has already passed one of those religious freedom bills, so I don't know enough about politics there to say whether this is going to pass the House.
Well, it's certainly possible that they would pass contradictory bills. That wouldn't be the first time. And a representative in Florida has introduced a bill. I don't know if this is going anywhere, and I don't like to talk about bills generally that I think are going nowhere, but his statements are so heinous. This is a bill that would require transgender and transsexual people to use bathrooms assigned to their birth gender Because when he was asked about this and told this is a bad idea, he said, going to the bathroom is a choice.
Well,
and gender is subjective. One would think that if he thought gender was subjective, then he would be a supporter of the LGBT community.
How about that Chelsea Manning? Chelsea has been hired by the Guardian newspaper as a contributing opinion writer. Congratulations.
She will be writing opinion columns from Fort Leavenworth, where she is incarcerated. She will not be paid for the columns because I think it is illegal to pay a federal prisoner. Someone suggested that, but it would be nice if she could be compensated in some way.
Right.
In Oregon, we may very soon have an openly bisexual governor.
How can that happen?
Well, the current governor is in trouble. He and his wife are being accused of influence peddling, the same kind of charge that brought down Bob McDonnell, the governor of Virginia.
After his governorship.
Yes, but it started, I think, when he was still governor. And certainly the alleged crimes happened when he was governor. So the Oregon governor, on the other hand, is a Democrat, I believe, and a friend of ours. But he may be out of office soon. This is a prediction, not a fact yet. And he would be succeeded by the Secretary of State, Kate Brown, who is openly bisexual.
Good news from New Jersey, where a court ruled that so-called conversion therapy, a group there called Jonah, which deals with Jewish folks who are usually sent by their parents to stop being gay, is guilty of consumer fraud because homosexuality is not a disorder. The judge said that Jonah offers stats for success, but did not track client outcomes. Jonah, and now listen to this, this group Jonah asked young men to undress and stand naked in a circle with the counselor as they reenacted past abuse. That sounds like something that should be criminally prosecuted.
It does.
It's basically sex abuse. Sounds like the counselor's getting off on it.
This is an ongoing lawsuit.
Sue me if you think I'm making that up.
Brought by former clients of this service and their parents and represented by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The suit is not over, although these intermediate determinations have been made. And my favorite part of it is that the judge rejected testimony by anti-gay witnesses, refused to let them testify because he said they're not experts, i.e. Joe Nicolosi and others who have been thrown out of the profession.
You know, that happened in the Scopes trial, too, or at least in the movie Inherit the Wind, when he tried to bring up the scientific experts on evolution, and the judge said, that's not an issue here. That's not what we're talking about. All right.
Well, this judge said these guys are not experts on anything. They're frauds, and they're not going to be allowed to testify as experts.
Speaking of testimony, in Nebraska, the Judiciary Committee there heard hours of testimony on a bill to ban discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. The Catholic Bishops group testified against it, and the bill faces a tough road to victory this year.
We talked last week about a new Republican head of a committee in the Senate or something, or maybe it was a guy in the House who was doing heinous things.
The head of the Human Rights Committee who said that gay rights aren't human rights?
Yes. Well, Texas Senator John Cornyn is the new chair of the Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution. It used to be called the Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Human Rights, but he deleted Civil Rights and Human Rights from the title of the subcommittee.
They do this every time they take over. I mean, Jerry Nadler, when he was head of the House similar committee, did the same thing, had the nice long title, and they took it out as soon as he left.
Unbelievable.
In Montana, the House there tabled a bill 10-10 to officially end the ban on same-sex marriage. But at least it went 10-10.
Back to Washington, D.C., out gay Representative Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, who holds Tammy Baldwin's Wisconsin seat, has been named a senior Democratic whip. That is considered a very high position among the Democratic minority leadership in the House.
You may remember Elizabeth Smart. She was kidnapped at 14 in Utah and raped for 9 months. But now as an adult says that abstinence-only education, which she received as a child, taught her that once you have had sex, and obviously, you know, that's the way she saw it when it happened to her. It was obviously an act of violence. But once you've had sex, you are like, quote, chewed up gum, and that no one will ever want again. So she felt she had no worth anymore, and that's one of the reasons that she didn't try to escape, and her life was over.
Wow. Hopscotching around. A Huffington Post asked every U.S. senator and representative, 535 of them, whether their office had a non-discrimination policy covering sexual orientation, gender identity. Only 105 responded, and of those, 94 have such policies, 24 in the Senate, 70 in the House. Steny Hoyer, who is the second in command among the Democrats in the House, and the LGBT caucus have now asked everybody to sign on.
It doesn't speak well for the prospects of a federal LGBT rights bill.
Well, the Congress is very reluctant to impose any rules on itself, even theoretical ones. So even if they pass laws controlling other people, they generally exempt themselves. You know, they have their own special health insurance plan.
Right. Should we give them the bad news about the violence around the country? I think we will start with...
let's start with the smallest news. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, transgender woman Aja Kennedy has filed suit for being jailed with men, harassed, sexually assaulted. She at least is still alive, which is...
In Bourne, Massachusetts,
right at the entrance to Cape Cod,
a lesbian married couple was shot, one killed, one wounded, by a man who served with them in the Coast Guard, Adrian Loya. He was stalking them, essentially. He was obsessed with one of them. We have the picture of them there. He also shot a police officer, Lisa Trubnikova, 31, is dead. She's on the left there. And her wife, Anna Trubnikova, is hospitalized. The officer, Jared McDonald, is hospitalized. Loyas was supposedly infatuated with Lisa and wouldn't leave her alone, and she didn't report him.
She wasn't. She thought she could handle him on her own, so she didn't report him. But he did stalk her, and he assembled quite an arsenal. And part of his, after shooting them, he set off a bomb to prevent the cops from getting him. He had a lot of other weapons. It was a real standoff there in Bourne, which is a small town right at the foot of the Bourne Bridge. It's a terrible story. Right. And the families of both women are really distraught by this as well. They would be. In New Orleans, transgender woman Penny Proud was found shot dead.
Yeah, transgender woman of color. This was on the wee hours of February 10th near the corner of Ursulines and North Claiborne Avenue in Tremay.
Yes.
Did I say it, the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And if you know anything, please call the police. There's a $2,500 reward. It's an area known for drug dealing and prostitution. So it's a rough part of town.
Another transgender woman of color, Taja Gabrielle de Jesus, 36 years old, stabbed to death in San Francisco. The death toll of just the cases that have been reported this year, and I have to believe that's a fraction of the actual cases, is now 9 in the first 6 weeks of 2015.
And another one is in Texas. A college football player, Carlton Ray Champion Jr. from Longview at Texas College, was arrested for killing his girlfriend after finding out that Tyra Underwood is transgender, supposedly.
Yeah. Now, the annual National LGBTQ Task Force Creating Change conference happened in Denver last week. And in the middle of the opening plenary, over 100 trans activists and allies stormed the stage to raise the issues of these murders of trans women of color, and
including the police killing Jesse Hernandez,
yes,
who was not
in Denver,
who was identified as a queer Latina, 17,
and demanding that LGBTQ organizations hire more trans people, put more trans issues at the top of their agenda, put people on their boards of directors. And it was a successful demonstration. Everybody cheered and blah, blah, blah. But because the murder by the cops of Jesse Hernandez in Denver was part of this issue, the mayor of Denver was there backstage waiting to speak to address the opening plenary, and he walked off. He said, I'm not going to walk out on a stage where clearly I'm going to be a target, and I'm leaving. And there is some discussion and debate about when the task force knew about the demonstration and should they have warned the mayor and rescheduled that and whatever. But that was not entirely ironed out by the end of the conference.
A couple of nice notes in New York where they've named 2 streets for gay people. One is for James Baldwin, the great author, in Harlem. He'll get part of West 128th Street where he went to school. So that's nice. And the other one is on Staten Island for a guy named Jimmy Zappa-Lordy, a Vietnam veteran, who was murdered in a hate crime in 1990. And this was really the start of the Staten Island LGBT movement, really, in terms of a big public thing. So.
Yeah, it was a terrible story. He was taunted and chased down the beach in Staten Island. And
he was a beloved figure out there.
Yeah, and beaten and killed. Back to Washington, Secretary of State John Kerry will appoint a gay foreign service officer as a special envoy to promote global LGBT rights. They are currently interviewing candidates. One reputed top candidate is this guy, Randy Barry, who's the Consul General to the Netherlands from the U.S. We'll let you know who gets appointed eventually. Anise Parker, the mayor of Houston, came in 7th in a list of the best mayors in the world.
In the world?
In the world. She was the only U.S. mayor named. This was by the City Mayors Foundation, which is a think tank that promotes good government.
Yeah, she's very impressive.
And President Obama was honoring the LA Galaxy soccer team at the White House because they won the league championship or something. All these sports teams end up at the White House. And
including that Little League team that just got kicked off their title.
They may have trouble because they brought in some players from another region, the suburbs. But Obama, in honoring the LA Galaxy, singled out for praise Robbie Rogers, the out gay member of the Galaxy, the guy who had come out as a prominent soccer player and quit immediately because he didn't think he could have a career. And everybody in soccer said, oh, come on.
We're soccer players. We're not football players.
We want you.
Although they call it football over on the other side.
Yeah, so he went back to play for the Galaxy, and they won the league championship. So we thought we'd show you a minute of President Obama praising.
Finally, I want to recognize what Robbie Rogers of the Galaxy has done for a lot of people by blazing a trail as one of professional sports' first openly gay players. My guess is that as an athlete, Robbie wants to win first and foremost. That's what competition's all about. But Robbie, you've also inspired a whole lot of folks here and around the world, and we are very proud of you. So where's Robbie?
Yeah, I just wasn't expecting it, and you know, when you go and you don't consciously think of yourself as being a gay athlete, you just think of yourself being part of the Galaxy, a team that's won a championship. So, you know, obviously it was a difficult journey for me to come out and then come back to soccer, and then just everything that's been involved with that. So, just for someone that's so accomplished, that is so well respected, and obviously he's our president, to kind of single you out and acknowledge you and to kind of just congratulate you is, I mean, I'll never forget it, definitely, and I've already texted my mom about it. So. It was a really special moment, and I'll cherish it always.
He's a cute guy.
Yes, he is.
No real updates on Bruce Jenner. Sorry that he was involved in that car crash, which certainly doesn't seem to be through any fault of his own. There's still a lot of attention being paid to him. And one of the people commenting on him was Zoe Tur, who...
We have a picture of Zoe.
Zoe is a transgender woman who has been hired by Inside Edition as a correspondent, special correspondent. She used to be a famous helicopter reporter in LA known as Chopper Bob.
Right.
And most famous for starting the O.J. Simpson chase of him in the white
Who can forget?
SUV. But there's some controversy over Zoe commenting on Bruce Jenner. Some of her comments were not considered politically correct.
Zoe was saying things like, come on, you're our sports hero, you know, get out there, we need you.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da.
Well, I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
And Zoe's daughter, Katie Tur, is a very good correspondent for CBS.
Yeah.
Did you see this story about the new GLAAD Harris polls that there's a lot of public support for our issues like same-sex marriage or non-discrimination, but personally people still feel more discomfort than that. Point I've been trying to make to you for a long time.
I totally agree.
Yes.
There is a lot of animus out there,
yes,
or discomfort that people still have. They still have it with kissing. I mean, one viewer sent us clips from Days of Our Lives. I never saw so much. I've always said, God, on soap operas, they're always showing people in bed and really going at it, but not with the gays. The gays get a quick kiss and they cut. This one went on forever, and it went on, you know, segment.
Well, it was clips.
Yeah,
clips,
I know.
Yeah.
It was throughout the whole show.
Yeah.
They were in bed the whole time.
Yeah.
They went at it a couple of times.
And there's a lot of that on primetime now, evidently, too.
So that will, I think, help people get over it.
We are in a process of desensitization. Yes. That is what we need. So our goal, some of our goals anyway, is to be routine.
Yeah, well, 30
equality to us means that we are homosexuality is regarded as equivalent to heterosexuality in its normalcy. Now there are people who say, why would we give up our specialness to be so routine and boring? But nonetheless,
it's safer. 30 years ago on this show, I spent 5 minutes kissing my boyfriend to try to desensitize people to it.
It didn't work.
It contributed.
Every little bit helps.
Right.
And congratulations to Larry Kramer. His new book is being published shortly, The American People, Volume 1.
Volume 1 is
for my
about
heart.
750 pages.
800.
Oh, my goodness.
But there's a Kirkus review.
Yeah.
Breathtakingly well written.
Yeah.
That's what they have to say about it.
Yes,
So,
they do.
and Larry, of course, is being honored by GMHC, which
he is often Larry founded GMHC and then was thrown off the board. And he's getting...
I stood outside GMHC one night with Larry protesting an event they were having.
But anyway, he's obviously made peace for the moment, although I'd love to hear his speech. What are you going to tell him, Larry, on March 23rd? He's getting the Larry Kramer Award.
He is. They often do that. They name an award after someone, and that person gets the first award.
Right.
And I would like to mourn the death of Andrew Patner from Chicago. 55 years old, had a sudden bacterial infection and was dead in 2 or 3 days.
Tell people who he was.
Very well-known cultural critic, wrote for the gay press there, the mainstream press, was on the radio, music critic, drama, really across the board. Beloved Chicago figure, very nice guy. One of the founders of the Chicago chapter of the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association years ago, Andrew Patner, 55, very, very missed in Chicago.
Okay. International news.
Yep.
Well, the Pope met with some Slovakian visitors over a week ago, and he told them, because they were having this big referendum on gay stuff, to, quote, continue their efforts in defense of the family, the vital cell of society. So they ended up putting him on a billboard here in Slovakia to support the referendum. And by the way, the Pope also said in that meeting, every family needs a father. That's a little self-serving on your part, Padre. I mean, 'cause, you lead a patriarchal church.
What about all those single mothers?
The Pope has been invited to speak. We're going to talk about what happened in Slovakia, but the Pope's been invited to speak to the United States Congress during a U.S. visit in late September, who leads this anti-gay religion. The wall between church and state is continuing to crumble. Of course...
You can say that about the Netanyahu speech, too.
Please. They may cheer the Pope on social issues, the right-wing Congress, but I wonder how they're going to respond to some of his wealth inequality statements, although they're picking that up, too, in Republican lingo. Wow. They're referring to it. They just think the answer is give rich people more money.
Exactly. They've always thought that. So they held this vote in Slovakia, and they have a rule in Slovakia that you have to have 50% of the population turn out to vote before the result of the vote is considered legal and legitimate. Well, guess what? Only 21.3% of the population turned out to vote.
Now, the people who turned out, 90% voted for the anti-gay measures, but it didn't pass because people stayed home. And that was apparently our strategy on our side, was to say stay home.
Well, it worked. Congratulations, Slovakia.
Although you still can't get married in Slovakia, and it's a very Catholic country.
You might be able to get married soon in Nepal. Several years ago, the highest court there declared that LGBT people must be given equal rights.
2007. It takes them a long time to do things over there. Because the government is very...
It's very high altitude.
No, it's that the government is very fractured, a lot of different parties, and it's very hard to get anything done.
Well, a year after the court decision, the court ordered a study done of how to proceed on these issues, and the study has just been published. That took 6 or 7 years. And it says that marriage between same-sex couples should be legalized, and non-discrimination laws covering sexual orientation and gender identity should be passed.
Yes, but it's up to the government to act, and it would be the first Asian country to do same-sex marriage if they do. And then there's what's going on in Malaysia, which is a right-wing country. It's basically had the same government since independence, practically.
Right.
And the court up there upheld the sodomy conviction of the opposition leader, Anwar Ibrahim. He's 67, and he was sentenced to 5 years last year, and this was his final appeal.
He was originally charged in 2008, and this is all about the politics of, he was a popular guy, he was an opposition leader, he was a top government official, but they wanted to prevent him from taking over, so they drummed up this charge.
Well, he, in the courtroom, he says to them, you, judges, are partners in crime with this government. That's not going to get you a light...
Sounds like Roy Moore.
That's not going to get you a light sentence. But, I mean, the U.S. said it's deeply disappointed in the judgment, although we elevated relations with Malaysia last year. The sodomy...
Trade. It's all trade.
The sodomy accusation was brought in 2008 by a former male aide. Abraham is married to a woman. The sodomy laws are rarely enforced, but the accuser was known to have colluded with the government beforehand to set this up, put the semen on the rug. It's completely trumped up.
Yep.
But it's been upheld.
There you are.
So he's going to jail.
Better news from, of all places, Ukraine. Here's a tiny ray of light. They were threatening to pass a Russian-style no gay propaganda bill. They canceled it.
Who got to them?
I don't know. Maybe this is their way of pleading to Europe and the U.S. for support. The U.S. is talking about sending troops or arms to Ukraine in their fight. Are we going to get in a war with Russia?
Please, no. In Russia, an actor there, he's an American, but he's a star of a sitcom there called Interns, medical drama. His name is Oren. Yeah, Oren Byron, B-I-R-O-N. He has come out in New York Magazine. The show that he's on also stars homophobe Ivan Oklobistin, who has said that gay people should be put in ovens and burned alive. That's Oren's picture up there. And he got really, first he said, oh, maybe I should quit the show, then he didn't, and now he's come out, and this is his way of doing it, but he's got a backup plan to live in Minnesota if it doesn't work out so well.
Yeah, he's protected himself. Rome, in defiance of the Vatican, has established a civil union registry. They will also recognize marriages performed in other countries for same-sex couples, and those people will be included in the civil union registry.
Yes, Italy has been the laggard of Western Europe.
They are, but they, you know, individual spots in Italy are making progress and coming into the 21st century. Right. And, you know, I'm somewhat confused and, of course, horrified by these murders by ISIS of supposedly gay men, throwing them off of towers.
If they don't die, then beating them to death when they're on the ground. It goes on and on and on. Well, it's a terrorism campaign.
Exactly.
It is a terrorism campaign.
And they're terrorizing everybody with this, so
it's a bit,
you know, we don't have to single us out, but it's bad.
AIDS news.
I have just one thing. There is a new invention that works on your smartphone or iPod, a little dongle, a little device that tests...
A dongle?
Tests for HIV and syphilis antibodies. It draws blood in a pinprick kind of thing, mixes with chemicals, and gives you a result. This was invented at Columbia University, and if it's not available now, it will be soon.
It takes about 15 minutes. The advantage of it is it can be used remotely in parts of the world where it's hard to get, you know, other kinds of medical things going on there.
Exactly.
Testing. Yes. So.
Entertainment news?
Yeah.
Well, of course, the big news of the week was Sam Smith at the Grammys.
We have a picture of him.
He'd been nominated for 6 Grammys. He's the out gay 22-year-old singer from England who did Stay With Me, very, very popular song this last year. Some people thought he's too young, he's too new, he won't win that many. They'll probably give him Best New Artist, but that's it.
They gave him 4.
Best New Artist, Best Pop Vocal Album, Song of the Year, and Record of the Year.
So when he picks up the award for Stay With Me, the song, he says, I want to thank the man who this record is about, who I fell in love with last year. Thank you so much for breaking up with me, for breaking my heart, because you got me 4 Grammys.
He was pretty charming. But again, as in the Super Bowl, they took a gay song and they took the edge off it a little now, I love Mary J. Blige, and hearing the two of them sing Stay With Me together was just fabulous. It was wonderful. But, you know, he could have sung it with a man. Katy Perry sang I Kissed a Girl with Lenny Kravitz. There's this little thing where people are not quite willing.
It's because we're only 4% of the population. And other people buy the records.
I guess so. The other interesting thing was this guy Hozier, whose name I hadn't known before this, but whose song I knew, Take Me to the Church, which was introduced sort of ironically as our spiritual section, but really it's about the horrors of the church. It's about the evil sins of the church, and the music video is 2 gay men kissing and being abused and all sorts of stuff. So go to YouTube and watch the video of Take Me to the Church, and you will see how this actually plays out. And it's a terrific song, but Hozier did it with Annie Lennox. Again, a spectacular performance. And Annie Lennox going on to sing Screamin' Jay Hawkins, I Put a Spell on You, was just mesmerizing. That was my favorite moment at the Grammys.
Well, I was watching the BAFTAs, the British Film Awards, and of course that's always hosted by Stephen Fry, and he really plays the gay angle there of himself, and he's fast and he's good. He was getting kissed by all kinds of stars. He even got kissed on the lips by Cuba Gooding Jr. That was great.
A couple of notes before we get to your reviews. Rosie O'Donnell leaving The View, divorcing her wife.
Bunch of Broadway
but being
notes.
kind of quiet about it.
Yeah, a bunch of Broadway notes. Fun Home, the musical based on Alison Bechdel's graphic novel about growing up with her closeted father in a funeral home, starts previews on March 27th on Broadway.
Laverne Cox is in a new CBS show, Doubt, as a transgender attorney.
Mrs. Doubtfire, the cross-dressing Robin Williams hit movie, is being turned into a musical by Alan Menken, David Zippel, and Harvey Fierstein, who played Williams' brother in the movie. It's in the early stages.
John Legend canceled a performance for a group at the Beverly Hills Hotel out of protest of Brunei, the owners of the Beverly Hills Hotel, instituting Sharia law. Go ahead.
George Takei, 77, is making his Broadway debut in October in a musical about the U.S. internment camps for Japanese Americans. He spent part of his childhood in one.
I can't wait to see that.
It's called Allegiance. It's played elsewhere, but it's coming here.
And the brilliant William Finn musical Falsettos is returning to Broadway in the spring of 2016, but it's so good I'd recommend lining up now.
And Kinky Boots is going to London next year.
Watch
Congratulations.
out. And there's a new book out by a woman named Patricia Velasquez, who's 43, was the first Latina supermodel. It's called Straight Walk, and it includes her whole long relationship with Sandra Bernhard.
So we saw a play together this past week, Rasheeda Speaks. It's at the new group.
Rasheeda Speaking.
Sorry, Rasheeda Speaking. Right. And it's at the new group. It's Cynthia Nixon's, Out Lesbians, directorial debut, and it's really a winner. It's about racial issues in the workplace with brilliant performances by Tanya Pinkins and Diane Wiest as the two office workers.
It's fabulous.
It really kept me off balance the way that an Albee play can, in a way. And but it was written by a guy named Joel Drake Johnson.
Chicago, and it's set in Chicago. It's a Chicago play.
But really good.
Really good. I wasn't even tempted to walk out, even though there was no intermission, but I wouldn't have, even if there was. It's funny, it's sharp, and as Andy says, it keeps you off balance. It's really Rasheeda Speaking.
Well, that's funny, but also very good is a thing called The Events at the New York Theater Workshop there in the East Village. This is a hit from the Edinburgh Festival, and it's one of what you'd have to call a unique theatrical experience. You've got two actors there, Neve McIntosh and Clifford Samuel, playing all different kinds of people in the community after a mass murder of a choir in a church. Some guy comes in and kills everybody. It's based on what happened in Norway with the kids.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's sort of. And they're incredibly sharp and moving, but we are treated, I will say this, to a different choral group. Every single performance uses a different choral group because they really want to involve the community in this and get people to talk about these issues, the ones I saw with the Bella Voce singers. I really recommend that.
And if you're looking for something to do next Thursday, the 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the LGBT Community Center here in New York at 208 West 13th Street, Gilbert Baker, artist and inventor of the rainbow flag, will be speaking on art as activism.
I'm going to make a note of that.
Thursday the 19th, 6:30 at the center. We got through all the news.
We did. We don't have anything else to talk about. The credits are running. If you want to be on our email list, write to me, Andy Hum, at AOL.com. Visit our website, www.gayusatv.org.
Where you can access the podcast of this show and the video on YouTube.
And like us on Facebook.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.